Hey guys, so I completely forgot to include tight ends in my other sleeper video in the first fantasy football video I did, and that's completely my fault. So this video I'm going to make a tight end sleeper video separately, and I hope you guys enjoy. So first let's start with Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. So Andrews was a 2018 third round pick of the Ravens, and funny enough was the second tight end they took in that same draft after Hayden Hurst. On the team website he's listed as their third tight end, which is weird, but that probably won't hold up because Andrews probably proved to the Ravens last year that he is their best tight end option, because Hayden Hurst and Nick Boyle definitely disappointed. Andrews also offered the big play upside that the other two did not. He had two plays that went over 60 yards, who is a big athletic guy with a big play upside, something that the other guys do not do, and that's something always important when you're looking for a tight end sleeper. The Ravens website also listed Andrews as a potential featured receiving target, and a young quarterback like Lamar Jackson should definitely feel safe targeting his biggest and probably most athletic receiver. So Andrews is listed at 6'5", 256 pounds, and ran a 4.6 40 at the 2018 Combine, which is pretty impressive. If you watch some of his highlights, you can tell what makes him special with the plays the guy makes and the way he hurdles over people, and his yards after the catch is very impressive as well. The only problem is that he's a mediocre blocker, and hopefully the Ravens can overlook that based off his receiving skills. Ironically, after Lamar Jackson took over as the starting quarterback, that's when Andrews had some of his biggest games. He had one catch for 74 yards in Lamar's second game and had 83 yards and a touchdown against the Chargers a month later. Andrews is one of those guys, if given the opportunity, can put up some crazy numbers. He only received 50 targets, and as a comparison, the top guys at the tight end position easily see over 100 targets. Let's say hypothetically we gave Andrews 100 targets in his rookie season and doubled his numbers. He would have had 68 catches, 1,104 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Those stats are insane and probably wouldn't happen, but it shows you the ridiculous upside that Andrews possesses. Andrews is going at pick 186, so he's basically free. He's going behind guys I'd take Andrews over, like Jimmy Graham or Kyle Rudolph. If you want to find this year's George Kittle, it's either Andrews or probably Noah Fant. Fant is a special talent, but we know rookie tight ends usually don't make a big fantasy impact in their first year, unfortunately. Up next is Delanie Walker, and from 2014 to 2017, Delanie Walker was one of the most consistent contributors in fantasy football. Since his second year with Tennessee, Walker has caught over 60 passes and over 800 yards in every season aside from last year. Obviously, Walker isn't a big threat for touchdowns, but that's not his game. But in any point per reception league, Walker is definitely a valuable option. This year he's going at number 134 overall and tight end number 12 overall. There are some concerns with Walker, and I'll touch on those real quick. He's coming off a fractured ankle that he suffered in week 1 last season, and he's turning 35 in August. The other downside to this situation is that he plays on an offense where they ranked 31st in pass attempts in 2018. But fear not, because Walker has performed highly in similar circumstances. Even when Walker was having his best seasons, the Titans ranked no higher than 22nd in attempted passes for a particular season. Walker seems very motivated about this season as well. From an interview in April, Walker said, "This is going to be my motivation year. I always say that I'm motivated every year, but coming off an injury like that and me being 35 into next season, I'll be extra motivated." He also has zero history of missing extended periods of time since 2007. He's played in over 14 games for 11 straight years up until last year. And his injury last season could have happened to anyone. It's not like there are multiple injuries and it shows his body is breaking down. As long as Walker stays on the field, which I think he will, and he gets over 100 plus targets, which I think he will, then you can bank on him getting somewhere from his usual 60 catches, 800 yards, and between 3 and 6 touchdowns. As someone who prefers to wait on tight ends, I could see myself taking a safe player like Walker and then following that up with Mark Andrews, Noah Fant, or TJ Hawkinson to see if they all break out. I'm just saying, if you play in PPR and want a consistent 5 to 7 catches for 50 to 60 yards each week, then taking Walker in the 11th round is probably going to benefit you. Next, we have Chris Herndon, and yes, Chris Herndon is unfortunately suspended for the first 4 games of the season, but do yourself a favor and keep him on your radar. I'm not saying draft Herndon unless you play in a really deep league, but if by week 3 or week 4 you're struggling at tight end and need someone who can break out, then picking up Chris Herndon can do no harm. As we know, it's rare for rookie tight ends to make immediate impacts, but for Herndon, he put up 39 catches for 502 yards and 4 touchdowns, which isn't bad for a rookie. It wasn't until the 9th game of the season where Herndon received consistent playing time, and it was at this point where he was the most effective. Over the final 8 games of the season, Herndon averaged 4.8 targets per game and put up some nice games as well during that stretch. At Miami, he had 4 catches for 62 yards versus New England, 7 catches for 57 yards versus Houston, 3 catches for 53 yards, and versus Green Bay, 6 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown. Herndon is pretty athletic for a guy his size, which is intriguing, and his yards after catch ability is something that's better than most tight ends. The growth of Sam Darnold can have a direct correlation with Herndon's numbers due to the fact that the two seem to have a nice connection last season. If Darnold can become the superstar that some people expect him to be, that could be not only huge for the Jets offense putting up points, but specifically for Herndon putting up more touchdowns and improving his upside. As of right now, Herndon is a 14th round pick, but his suspension is still pretty recent, so we might see him going undrafted by the time August comes around. I had a similar situation myself a few years ago when Antonio Gates was suspended the first 4 games. I picked up Gates before week 3, and boom, there was my starting tight end the rest of the season. If you can leave your draft with a tight end that plays well for 16 games, that's even better. But if the tight end position is a wasteland like it usually is, then Herndon should be useful. The last sleeper tight end I have is Jack Doyle, so I'm sure some of us remember that Jack Doyle had 80 receptions just 2 seasons ago. Whether you do or not, it's definitely reflected in his fantasy value. Right now, Doyle is ranked as tight end number 22, and I believe people are overlooking him a little too much. So in the games that Doyle and Eric Ebron were on the field at the same time, guess who ran more routes? It was Jack Doyle. Yes, Ebron does get more looks in the red zone, but in terms of overall volume, there's a good chance that a healthy Jack Doyle sees more targets than Ebron overall. Unfortunately for Doyle, he dealt with a lot of injuries last season. In week 2, he had a hip injury that kept him out the next 5 games, and 4 weeks after returning, he hurt his kidney and was done for the season. Doyle's injuries should raise some eyebrows, but he's only 29, and before 2018, he played in at least 15 games in his first 5 seasons. If we take Doyle's numbers from last season and put them over 16 games, here's how they would look. 88 targets, 69 receptions, 640 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Now those aren't fantastic numbers, but let's remember that Doyle left early in 2 of those 6 games. If you look at the 4 games he made it all the way through without getting hurt, let's put those over 16 games. 96 targets, 80 receptions, 836 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. So that right there is basically what we saw from Doyle in 2017, except you're adding about 150 yards. I'm assuming everyone wants the guy that scored 13 touchdowns and Eric Ebron, but honestly, if I had to pick between Ebron in the 5th or 6th round and Doyle in the 14th or 15th round, I would take Doyle every time. It's not that I don't like Ebron or don't think he's any good, but him scoring all those touchdowns definitely inflates his draft stock way too much. If there's one thing that's tough for a receiver to replicate, it's scoring touchdowns. So yeah, this isn't an avoid Eric Ebron video, but personally I'm staying away from him. Give me the guy who's going out on more passing routes, playing more snaps when both are healthy, probably going to get more catches, and probably going to have more receiving yards as well. There are plenty of mouths to feed in Indy, of course, but Doyle is going to get his. If he can stay on the field and get between 80 and 100 targets, I'd expect him to be top 12 at the tight end position. That'll do it for this video. Comment your favorite tight end sleepers and why. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.